Hello, and welcome to Composer Toolbox, the show that takes an in-depth look at individual techniques used by composers and how to practically apply them. In this episode, I'm going to take an in-depth look at the themes and layout motifs John Williams composed and used in the original Star Wars and how they relate to the film. So without further ado, let's jump in. First, one thing that I want to stress very heavily is the historical context that Star Wars was made in. At the time that Star Wars was released in 1977, there wasn't really any film like it. For me, one of the most important factors that set this film apart was the technological innovation that resulted from Industrial Light and Magic's involvement with the production of the film. But of course, John Williams' score for Star Wars is the element that set this film apart from the opening text crawl. At the time, during the 60s and 70s and moving into the 80s, jazz and pop scores for movies were all the rage. We could have gotten some cheesy, futuristic electronic score, but thankfully George Lucas and Williams had a different score in mind. Immediately from the opening B-flat major chord, Williams tells the audience that this will be an experience unlike any they have ever had before. Then, merely a few seconds in, Williams introduces the world to the main Star Wars theme. Williams plays the main theme boldly and proudly without holding anything back. He plays the theme several times for us during the text crawl in addition to his secondary Star Wars theme, and this only ingrains the theme in our heads for easy recognition of it later in the film. Also, notice how the secondary theme is only played once here. Outside of the opening text crawl, the B theme is really only played twice, once during the cue entitled The Swashbucklers as Luke and Leia are shooting at stormtroopers across a chasm, and during the throne room scene. Williams still introduces us to the secondary theme, but his inclusion of it once tells us it's not that important. It's trapped between several iterations of the main theme as well. Next, as the text crawls away, Williams moves away from the main theme and starts to explore some different harmonic and rhythmic textures that I'll cover in a later episode. Now I'm going to interject something that builds off what I was trying to emphasize earlier. When watching Star Wars, I really gain a new appreciation for it when I watch it as if I were an audience member in a theater in 1977, seeing it for the first time. When I imagine myself as this opening scene becomes so much more breathtaking and awesome. When I see the text crawl fade away in the distance, I think, okay, how's this film going to start? My question is immediately answered as the camera pans down. As this happens, Williams builds tension with fast string runs and heavy brass chords, more on the orchestration in a later video. Then both the camera and the music land on Tatooine. Now I'm thinking, whoa, that's an interesting planet. But my thoughts are quickly interrupted by this ship and Williams' introduction of the Rebel fanfare. Whoa, look at the size of that ship. Look at those lasers. What are they shooting at? Again, I'm quickly told when I see the Star Destroyer come into frame. And here, Williams doesn't hold back. With these big, repeated, Holst-like chords, he tells us that this is a space battle of epic proportions. Now I'm literally going nuts in my seat thinking, oh my dear lord, that is a big spaceship. We are instantly thrust into this space battle, and Williams' music tells us this. He again plays the Rebel fanfare as the Rebel blockade runner attempts to escape the clutches of the looming Star Destroyer. Remember the Rebel fanfare's use here because it will become important later. Next, at the cut to the interior of the ship, Williams continues the rhythmic pedal tone that ended the previous cue, and he also plays an augmented version of the Rebel fanfare several times. As the cue continues on, we see the blockade runner being captured and the rebels preparing for the bad guys boarding. As we wait, the music builds suspense until the stormtroopers come crashing through the door. During the chaos of this scene, Williams plays what sounds like a variation on the Imperial theme that he uses throughout the film. This variation, being played with the stormtroopers' entrance, begins to make another connection in our mind with this theme and the bad guys. As the rebels begin their futile retreat, the chaos in the music goes away, and we are bombarded with yet another statement of the Rebel fanfare. This use of the Rebel fanfare is again made in conjunction with the characters trying to escape on screen. First it was used with the ship trying to escape, and now the rebels. And then, oh my goodness, we are introduced to Darth Vader. The music comes to a screeching halt and announces his entrance with brass in the same intervals as the Imperial motif. Williams, of course, expertly gets the music out of the way so that the audience can bask in the sheer, terrifying power of Vader. As he walks off, the music crescendos to the next scene where we hear the iconic Force theme for the very first time. About the Force theme, Williams says this, quote, I think of Ben's theme as also being the theme of the Jedi Knights, the old Republic that Ben remembers. It also overlaps into the area of being the theme for the Force, the good Force that Ben represents, end quote. Knowing this in terms of subtext here, Leia is recording a message that is, we later learn, directed to Obi-Wan Kenobi, a Jedi Master from the days of the Old Republic. I think Williams could have simply played Leia's theme first here since we see her first, but Williams knew the connection of the recording to Ben was important, so he emphasized its connection to the Force before introducing us to another character theme. But Williams doesn't let this opportunity to introduce us to Leia's theme slip by either. As we see a full shot of Leia, we hear Leia's theme as well. Then, at the cut to the rebels being led down the hallway, Williams doesn't play the rebel fanfare, because, well, they're not running anymore. They've been captured. There's no need to play the rebel fanfare. Then, after we see Darth Vader choke Captain Antilles to death, we again see Princess Leia, and Williams makes another statement of her theme so that the connection between her and her musical theme is formed in our mind. Next, as we see the droids again, Williams plays the unaltered Imperial theme for us. At first, I found it a little odd that the Imperial theme would be playing in conjunction with the good guy droids. But I think Williams is probably playing the threat of the stormtroopers just around the corner, and this seems to make sense since we see C-3PO nearly get shot by a blaster. Next, as the escape pod hurtles towards Tatooine, Williams plays a melody that doesn't really mean anything and isn't used outside of these few seconds. I also find it interesting how Williams uses a romantic-sounding sound for the droid's escape, but more on that in a future episode. Then, as we see Leia being taken prisoner and being led to Darth Vader, the Imperial theme plays, as we expect it to this time, in conjunction with the stormtroopers and Darth Vader. Williams again plays the theme several times so that we can get familiar with it and associate it with the bad guys in our mind. Then the Imperial motif is played by brass at the cut to the exterior of the Star Destroyer. This of course helps us associate it with the Empire, and more specifically in this film, the Empire's weapon of mass destruction, the Death Star. The next thing of melodic importance happens in the cue Little People. Here we are introduced to an otherworldly theme for the Jawas that isn't really revisited after this cue. But more importantly, we are introduced to Luke, and we hear the Star Wars main theme again for the first time since the opening text crawl. Williams almost immediately makes sure that we know that Luke is a very important character in this film. He does this by playing the big, grandiose Star Wars theme we heard earlier, now in the humble-sounding horns. Also notice how he plays it as Luke is briefly the only character on screen. The theme is played in a different way, but we've now made a very important relationship in our minds with Luke in the main theme of this entire saga. The next thing of melodic importance happens when we first see the fragmented Leia message. We hear her theme again, which of course further solidifies the connection made in our mind. This lets us know for certain that this is the same woman that was captured by the Imperials. Also notice how the Force theme is not played here like it was when Leia was recording the message. What we see isn't complete, and so we still don't know what the importance of the message actually is. So Williams takes this opportunity to associate Leia's theme again. And now we get to talk about the binary sunset scene. Williams has this to say about it, quote, "George asked for Ben's theme here once he had heard it. I'd originally scored that scene with Luke's theme, but when he heard the other, he said, 'Could you put Ben's theme in there?' He liked it for some reason or other better for that scene. It is difficult to explain why. It is contemplative and reflective, and it works really very well. I think I have to say in the end he was very right." But the use of the Force theme also probably has some subtext to it too. Luke wants to leave. There's nothing for him on Tatooine. As he looks towards the two stars, out into the vast expanse of space, he longs for something, maybe for purpose. As he does this, Williams plays the Force theme. It will be Luke's contact and connection with the Force that gives him purpose later in the story. It's Luke's connection with the Force that also drives the events of the rest of the trilogy forward. It's really what successfully leads the rebellion to victory in Return of the Jedi. Obviously, Williams had no clue 2 sequels would be made to this film, but I think he still understood on a basic level the importance of Luke's longing for purpose. His purpose, that is, to be a Jedi Master. Next, Williams makes a seemingly random statement of the rebel fanfare as Luke goes back inside. Maybe this foreshadows Luke's involvement with the rebellion. Then Williams makes another statement of the Star Wars/Luke theme. It's played in its simple version to remind us of Luke's humble beginnings. This statement again makes a more solid connection in our mind as well. Then another statement of the Force theme happens. I'm thinking this also foreshadows something, specifically Luke's crossing paths with Ben shortly after this. Alright, fast forward a bit and we get the next statement of the Force theme. Naturally, this is played as Ben is revealed to us as Obi-Wan Kenobi and as a friend. A connection might also be made in our mind between Luke's longing for purpose back at the binary sunset and Ben's helping him find his purpose. Then, Williams plays the Force theme again several times in our interaction with Ben, and I'm sure you know what I'm about to say, but this repetition helps make a solid connection between Ben and the Force and its theme in our mind. And then, as Luke helps C-3PO, Williams plays something that is, well, probably coincidence, but it really sounds similar to the regal melody heard during the throne room scene. The rhythm is the same, the contour is the same, the intervals are, well, similar, but again, this is probably just a coincidence, but, I thought I'd at least mention it here. Next, fast forward a bit more, and as we hear Ben talk about how Darth Vader killed Luke's father, we hear a dark rendition of the Imperial theme to further establish the connection between Vader and the bad guys. But then, as Ben describes the Force, we of course get the Force theme. A connection in our minds is made between the theme and the Force, but a connection is also probably made between Luke's destiny/purpose and the Force. Then, once we see the full Leia message, we naturally hear her theme again. Then, when Ben tells Luke to learn about the Force, we hear the Force theme again, possibly symbolizing Luke's destiny with the Force. Then, the Imperial motif announces the transition to the Star Destroyer in our first look at the Death Star. After Vader chokes another dude and we transition back to Tatooine, we get a somber melody for the merciless slaughter of the Jawas, and we get a statement of the Force theme as Luke anxiously rushes home. Now, Williams already knows what's about to happen back home, so his use of the Force theme here could maybe be foreshadowing how this major event in Luke's life will propel him forward into his journey, his purpose. Then, as Luke sees his parents burnt to a crisp, the Force theme plays again, telling us of Luke's now inevitable journey ahead of him. Next comes one of my favorite moments in this film. As Luke looks down and then back up with a new, set look on his face, Williams plays a forceful statement of the infamous Dies Irae. As many of you probably know, this ancient melody has been used in conjunction with death in music for more than 100 years. Williams' use of it here perfectly shows the hatred Luke quickly develops for the Empire, hence why the theme is played so forcefully. Then we get another announcement of the Empire with the Imperial motif that tells us without question who's responsible. Then, as we see Vader walking down the hall, we get an obvious use of the Imperial theme, and then an obvious use of Leia's theme as we see her. Going forward a bit more, Williams uses the Force theme again as Ben once again tells Luke to learn about the ways of the Force. This iteration is now played with a new sense of purpose. Then, as they move into Mos Eisley, we get the Imperial theme as the stormtroopers close in, but then we get a statement of the Force theme after Ben uses his Jedi mind tricks. The use of the Force theme after its successful use, I think, better emphasizes its power in the film. Then, fast forward a bit more, don't worry, I'll talk about the cantina scene in a later video, we hear Luke's theme fittingly as he parts away with the last thing he has left on Tatooine, his speeder. Then, going forward more, we hear the Imperial theme as the stormtroopers continue their search. Then, as our heroes blast off with Han and Chewie, we get another few statements of the Force theme. I imagine the use of the Force theme here could be still talking about Luke's journey. His departure from Tatooine is the final nail in the coffin here. There's no turning back from it now, and this is his purpose. Then, of course, we get another announcement of the Death Star with the Imperial motif. Then, the next thing of melodic importance happens a bit later as the Millennium Falcon gets pulled into the Death Star. Interestingly enough, Williams uses the Rebel fanfare here. Now, why would he use the Rebel fanfare as our heroes get captured? Well, if we go back and look again at the previous uses of the Rebel fanfare, they've almost all been made in connection with the good guys running or the good guys being captured. So I think Williams is making a subtle parallel here between the opening scene where the blockade runner is being captured and here where the Millennium Falcon is being captured. Then, going forward more, as we see the heroes narrowly avoid capture, we hear the Force theme again. This could still be talking about Luke's journey and destiny here, or it could just be that we needed the presence of a familiar theme after they're near capture. Then we get a couple more obvious uses of the Imperial theme, and then we hear the Star Wars main theme for the first time since we were on Tatooine. I imagine Williams uses the all-encompassing theme here since we have multiple important characters on screen. Then the all-encompassing main theme is used again as they attempt to make their way towards the princess. Then, as a firefight ensues, we get a fitting heroic statement of the Star Wars theme. This seems to directly contrast the simple iteration of the Star Wars theme back when Luke was on Tatooine. Then Williams uses the Rebel fanfare, again as the threat of capture looms. Then, we get an obvious use of Leia's theme, and then as the stormtroopers arrive, we get several statements of the Imperial theme. Williams also again makes use of the Rebel fanfare as they are about to either be killed or captured. Next, fast forwarding a bit, we get several uses of the Imperial theme as the walls converge. Then we get the Star Wars theme again as our heroes get closer to escaping, but the Imperial theme accompaniment surprises us as the stormtroopers appear around the corner. Williams uses the Imperial theme a lot throughout this cue to represent the presence of stormtroopers everywhere. Then we get another very heroic statement of the Star Wars theme as Luke shoots the stormtroopers across the chasm. Again, this directly contrasts with the version of the theme we heard when Luke was on Tatooine. Then we hear the secondary main theme for the first time since the opening text crawl. Not really quite sure of its significance here, but we get another statement of the main theme directly afterwards. Then a fragmented version of Leia's theme plays briefly. Another simple statement of the main theme happens at the cut to the droids, but is quickly followed by another statement of the Imperial theme as we see the stormtroopers chase Han and Chewie. Then, going forward a bit more, we hear a fitting and simple statement of part of the Force theme as Ben surrenders to Vader's killing strike. Then we get an interesting use of Leia's theme here. Specifically about this, Williams says, quote, "I used part of the Princess theme in the beginning of it for two reasons. I took dramatic license because it was the most sweeping melody in the score, but I'm also playing it because it's what's inside of her and Luke during their reaction to his death." End quote. Williams then again uses the Rebel fanfare as our heroes attempt to escape imminent capture. Then, as Luke dwells on Ben's death, we get another somber statement of the Force theme. This is a major turning point in Luke's journey, and the use of the Force theme here helps signify this. Then, as the TIE Fighters attack, we get many uses of the Rebel fanfare as they once again attempt to escape certain death. Now, fast forwarding more, we get to the exciting Battle of Yavin sequence. Williams says this about it, quote, "During the last battle, there is a lot of exciting battle music which I think is beautifully played by the LSO. Very, very difficult, and they read it just brilliantly. And that battle music includes most, if not all, of the themes in this picture." End quote. We first hear the Imperial motif at the cut to the massive Death Star. Then we get a variation of the Force theme as the X-Wings go into battle. This could be signifying the cultivation of Luke's journey here, or it could just be Williams using a familiar theme for this decisive battle. We get another statement of the Force theme as well as the Imperial theme as we see Darth Vader inside the Death Star. After this, we get even more statements of the Force theme. Then, after the music lays out until Luke's attack run, we get a statement of the main Star Wars theme as Luke gets closer to the target, getting closer to his goal. Then we get a sweeping rendition of the Force theme as Ben tells Luke to use the Force. As Luke gets nearer, we'll get more statements of the main Star Wars theme, and some are slightly altered even. This again shows the importance and weight of this major event in Luke's path. Then, spoiler alert, after Luke successfully murders thousands of government officials and law enforcement, we finally get a statement of the Rebel fanfare in a victorious context. And then we get the well-known and triumphant throne room scene. Williams says this about it, quote, "The entrance to the throne room has a big fanfare as they come in, and Ben's theme is used in a kind of a parade way. In this sense, it represents the triumph of the values of the Old Republic. I don't know how George thinks of it literally, but at least musically that's how it works. That is followed by the presentation of the medals, which is the theme I'm very fond of. It is a kind of land of hope and glory bit. It's almost like coronation music, really, which the scene seemed to want. We also get the third statement of the Star Wars secondary theme before the final Land of Hope and Glory theme statement. Then we go to the end credits where Williams reprises all the themes and the rest is history. So, as you can see, Williams uses themes for more than just playing a character's respective theme when they're on screen. Williams uses the themes that he came up with to give more meaning to the story. And that's, I think, one of the most important things to always keep in mind when writing any film score. Don't ever betray the story. Stick to the story. You see, this film is an excellent example of how the music works on multiple levels besides just a superficial one. And this concept is even more relevant today since today's moviegoer audience is more sophisticated than they were back in 1977. And this is why Williams doesn't play the Star Wars theme every time Luke is on screen. He plays the Star Wars theme at key moments throughout the film that matter. The audience doesn't need the music to tell us what's on screen, they have eyes that work just fine. What the audience needs is music that helps them better understand the characters on screen and what their relationships are with each other. And Williams, even in 1977, completely understood this. But on the other side of that, Williams also understands that before you can understand how a theme tells a story, you first have to make the connection between the characters and the theme. That's why, towards the beginning of the film, Williams does play the characters' respective themes when they're simply on screen. Let's continue to look practically at the main Star Wars theme. After Williams introduces us to the theme in the opening text crawl, he doesn't play it again until we see Luke. When we meet Luke for the first time, he plays it several times so we can associate it with him. And then he doesn't play it again until another important moment. He doesn't play it while Luke is complaining about his life, and he doesn't play it while Luke is eating dinner with his aunt and uncle. He plays it once Luke leaves, and his uncle non-committally says that he'll let Luke leave after the next harvest. This use of the theme helps us better understand the unfortunate situation that Luke is in, and makes us feel for him. Then, although Williams originally intended for the main theme to be played as Luke looks longingly at the binary sunset, Lucas convinced Williams that the main theme wasn't appropriate, so he doesn't play the main theme. The main theme was better put to use when we see Luke looking for R2. And then the main theme isn't played again until after the cantina scene when we see Luke sell his speeder. Again, there were many scenes leading up to this one where Williams could have played the main theme simply because Luke was on screen, but he doesn't. Williams waits until this brief but important moment when Luke sells off the last thing he has left on Tatooine. Then the theme isn't used again until the heroes overtake a control room inside the Death Star, and even here, Williams might not be using the theme to represent just Luke, but our heroes as a whole. Williams uses the theme several more times as our heroes, including Luke, go after the princess. As I mentioned in the breakdown, Williams is probably using the main theme in this way to directly contrast Luke as he was back on Tatooine. He's a different person now, and the different treatment of the theme represents that. Now, Williams does this sort of thing with all the other themes in the movie, and I could go and break down his use of the Imperial, Leia, and Rebel fanfare theme, but I think I've explained enough that you can draw your own conclusions at this point. Unless you really want me to break down those themes, I can if you want, I suppose. So I'll leave you with this main point of application. Stick to the story. Don't ever betray the story. The music you write tells its own story along with the movie's, and if it doesn't match what the movie is saying, you've essentially ruined it. The story that the music tells can have a very powerful effect on how the audience views and even interprets the film. And one of the ways that your music tells a story is through the themes and leitmotifs it utilizes. Themes and leitmotifs are a very powerful tool to have in your composer toolbox, but you must be careful to use the tool carefully and not haphazardly. Stick to the story. Alright, that's my complete breakdown and application on the themes used in Star Wars. Be sure to stay tuned for our next breakdown and application of harmonic tools used by Williams in Star Wars. We're going to talk about scales, parallel harmony, tonality versus atonality, how that all tells a story within itself, and much more. So, thank you for watching, and I'll see you later. Goodbye.